Gotta be careful how he uses that. Just get punished.
So close.
Oh, he's so low. That's it. That was so close.
That was crazy. Nice little poke in there.
It is about 4:10 here in Seoul. I'm just about to leave my apartment and head down to cast ASL. I am so glad to finally fucking be casting again. It has been forever. I've barely had any work. We are here in the midst of coronavirus. There's been a huge outbreak here in Korea. This has been really interesting to follow. I have never seen South Korea react to anything so strongly, and that includes missiles being shot from North Korea. So it's been pretty wild to be in a huge Asian megacity and watch this stuff unfold. I'm curious to see how many more esports events are going to be canceled and or delayed because of this. I'm also wondering what's going to happen with the economy globally because so many things are getting shut down. So many gatherings are being stopped, basically. It's going to be really interesting to see this thing unfold. I actually was in Japan at EVO when I started reading about this, and I was wandering around. You know, I keep up with the news, but I thought, okay, this is probably not going to be anything. And then by the time I got back to Korea, I'm such a hypochondriac. I had a little bit of a cold, and I thought, oh, fuck, I probably have coronavirus. But it went away in 2 days. But yeah, I mean, it's been crazy to see what's been going on with this. Definitely wash your hands. If you're in one of these cities where it's an issue, wear a mask. Anyways, I was at EVO. All my StarCraft work had been delayed, so I thought, why not go to an esports event that I'm not covering and just kind of hang out as a fan and do some interviews there. First of all, EVO was fucking awesome. It was really cool to meet some of you guys that listen to the podcast down there. I got the chance to sit down with Anakin. For those of you who are mostly acquainted with StarCraft, Anakin is the best American Tekken player. A really cool guy. I was really grateful I got to sit down and interview him. If you're watching this on video, first of all, I'm sorry, it looks kind of shitty. We just had one camera that we set up in my very tiny Tokyo apartment. So there's going to be a couple interviews that we have in the tank right now that are going to look like this, but when we do more recordings back here in Seoul, it's going to be looking better and better. We already have plans to improve the stuff we already recorded in Seoul. So anyway, sorry in advance. We thought about not using it, but then thought, fuck it, let's just throw it up. Anyways, it was really good talking to Anakin. I think you guys are going to enjoy this. I guess we can go ahead and start it now. Okay, so we're here on the first day of EVO. How have your games gone so far?
The first day of a big tournament is usually a mellow day, especially for a tournament like this where you have like thousands of people. Not everybody is going to be a cutthroat professional, and the first day usually is all about kind of weeding out the strong players from the weak, and everyone's somewhat separated for the most part. And it was a mellow day for me. I advanced through to the winner's side. There are 3 phases of the tournament and then a semifinal. So we completed phase 1 today, and then I'll be competing tomorrow. That's when the good stuff starts happening.
So we were talking about this a little bit before we got to the room up here, but I mean, you're the big representative from NA, and I think this is true not just in Tekken, but it's been true in StarCraft and other games, but I think NA sometimes has just a little bit weaker representation in games. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely agree. I've been following not only Tekken, but a lot of other competitive games over the years. I'm just a lover of video games and competing in general, and following storylines from all different games. You rarely see representation on the biggest stage, and when you see them, they're kind of just like an afterthought. The Americans were there, they competed, but in the end, we got Korean champions, Japanese champions, European champions, and I find myself thinking about why that is a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I guess my theory in the end, or where I'm at right now, is just I think the way that Americans approach strategic games, they're not really giving the games credit enough to where it's like, I need to put time into doing this. I need to get better at it. And when the average American player that is starts off playing, they're just winging it and they're doing their own thing. And as a result, I think like the overall average skill level kind of just starts off on the wrong foot. You know what I mean?
Is it also possible it's just simply a regional thing because, that continent is so far away, it's harder to get players that are going to be able to compete at the same level. Asia is so dense. There's so many people here.
Perhaps, yeah. I would say the geographical advantages definitely are a factor in a country like Japan or Korea. You know, for in Tekken's case, you have the best players in the world just a short subway ride, short taxi ride away, and they can meet up and play. And that's been the case for decades, right? And you mentioned that I represent the United States, and then my greatest American rival lives across the country in San Francisco. I'm from Atlanta, and we don't see each other until we're already at the tournament. So it's not like I'm able to play against him on a regular basis. We're not really able to, you know, kind of train each other up. But in the end, it's just about working with what you got. You know, I come from a strong Tekken city as far as America is concerned, and I'm really grateful that I've met the people that I did meet and took the path that I did take. But so I don't really think about that too much. I kind of just like roll with it.
You know, one thing about fighting games in general, is that there's so many of them. I mean, I'm an RTS guy, and like we don't actually have choices. Like you have to do StarCraft.
Yeah.
If you're into RTS.
No Command and Conquer.
Yeah, there's no. I mean, you can do Warcraft 3. I mean, there have been other games, but you don't have a lot of choices. So, Tekken is, especially now, it's bigger than ever before. But when did you start with the Tekken franchise? And was it in part because it was like the game at your local arcade, or was there a reason why you picked this game specifically over others?
It was pretty straightforward. I enjoy fighting games, so it's not like Tekken is the only one that I played as a kid. And I've been playing Tekken for a long time. I'm turning 29 years old this year, which is crazy to think because my very first tournament was in 2002 when I was probably like 11 years old or something like that. Barely old enough to even reach over the cabinet sticks and everything. So I'm definitely like very, very battle tested in Tekken. But it all just comes back to the arcade days, like you said. You know, Tekken is an arcade game first and foremost. And as a kid, every day or, you know, on the weekends, my father would take me to we'd go family trip to the mall, and that mall had an arcade. And it all started off just me playing those redemption games, trying to get tickets and just being a little kid. But I saw that there was this one particular machine that just had a group of guys standing around it. And there was no other game in the entire arcade, you know, whether it be air hockey or just, you know, whack-a-mole, where nobody's really playing the game, any game like they were playing Tekken. And I was so curious as a kid. You know, I played a little bit of Tekken 3 because as a kid living in like a large apartment complex, the kids often traded games around. And I eventually just got my hands on Tekken 3. That was the first Tekken that I played. And when I saw Tekken in the arcades and I saw all those players, I thought, you know, I'm going to give it a shot. I beat up my sister. I beat up my father at home playing Tekken. And, you know, when I got received my first pounding from some of the local arcade guys, it was just, you know, love at first sight. I just couldn't get enough of Tekken, and just being that little kid at the arcade who, you know, the older guys were looking at, talking trash, making fun of each other every time they would lose to me. That was more motivation for me to just like stay with that game. So as like the days went on as a kid, it stopped being about going to the arcade to win tickets for candy and everything, but just standing at that one machine every single day trying to win more than I did yesterday. And my father was just extremely supportive. You know, he was really glad that to see the group of guys playing, they were good people, and he could tell, and he didn't mind leaving me there, going around the mall because they would watch over me. And that was kind of like the history of where it all began. And what's cool about that is even to this day, those guys that I grew up with as a kid playing Tekken in Atlanta, they're still friends. You know, they're a lot older now, but they're still following, and I still see them on a regular basis. They always just message me, hit me up, you know, wishing me well in tournaments. So it's like a family that we have out there.
Wait, so you were going to arcades as a kid. I just had a curiosity. What other arcade games did you play?
After I started Tekken, it would just straight up be play Tekken, and when you lose, you have to wait in line. If there was a rotation on that one cabinet, I'd go play some light gun shooters. I enjoyed Time Crisis and House of the Dead.
Oh,
that was just it. That was just it. You know, I learned pretty much how to last a long
Crisis
time.
1 or 2? Or?
Every single time the new Time Crisis came out, I'm all on it. You know, getting my reflexes ready. I really enjoyed those games. You know, those were pretty much the ones. I tried other fighting games, but I guess in the end, I just, you know, fell in love with Tekken. That was the one.
So did your competitiveness, it was birthed then in the arcade, or did you dream of going to tournaments down the road, or did you find out about tournaments, or what is the history of you starting as a young kid, starting to take out these older players in arcades, and then you know, here you are, we're in Tokyo now, and you know, you're one of the top people at this tournament. How did you end up here?
Yeah. I remember my very first tournament like it was yesterday. You know, a lot of people, when they enter their first tournament, they usually just peace out really early, 0-2. They don't do well, but I remember there was a flyer at my local arcade to go to another mall with another arcade there, and there was like a tournament, a competition, and my father took me all the way up Georgia, and we went to that tournament. I saw all the friends that I played locally there, and it was just a blast, to like pay $10 and fight one opponent, move on to the next round. It was, I think growing up, I was already super competitive. I have one older sister, and she's like the overachiever. She was just like the perfect role model and everything. And my parents would always just say, you should be more like your sister and everything. I just wanted to like do good at something,
Yeah.
And then, my grades were good, but they would never be up to like par with her grades and everything. And so that was kind of like my thing, I think that's why my dad was so supportive, was that he found something that his son really liked and is kind of like improving on, and it's building character in some ways. Yeah. He's being social with these guys, and it was kind of like a fellowship that went on, and that was kind of how it started. Going to that tournament, I got second place, which was super crazy because I was still, like I said, just 12 years old. The guys at the time were probably in their late teens, early 20s.
How old was the guy that beat you?
He was also a prodigy as well. He had just,
oh, really?
Yeah, his name was Aurario. His dad owned the arcade, and he had just came back from.
That's a sick advantage.
Yeah, it was very unfair because the game wasn't even out yet on console. The kid could just go there and play every day at the arcade. But he was fresh off getting second at Tekken 4 Nationals. He lost to this player from San Francisco, and he was the hot shot player in Atlanta. And I think that everybody understood, he was the guy. Nobody really stood a chance, but I went up there and, got that first taste of defeat in the tournament. And, I was hooked after that. I was just waiting on the next flyer to pop up at the arcade. And it wasn't until a little while after that, because at the time, internet usage was like kind of fairly new. And so like announcements for tournaments like that weren't as prevalent, and it was a little harder to find. Just competitive gaming in general was just kind of, whatever. There weren't major tournaments. Guys are driving hours to other states just to prove a point, not to win thousands of dollars, but they just want to rep their city. And that was kind of like the humble beginnings of the FGC back in like the early 2000s when tournaments started starting up. I remember that, vividly. So like I said, since I was a kid, I wasn't really able to travel, and I was just, for the longest time, I remained local, just like a ATL player. And then, as the days went on, I would move out of my territory regionally, going to Tennessee, going to Florida when I was like 15, 16 years old or so. Like I said, my dad was just the most supportive father. I remember him driving me to Miami, driving me to Houston, Texas. Those are 12-hour drives just to stand there and watch me play. So I owe a lot to him, as far as getting that tournament experience and not stopping, at a loss, and not, keep going and everything. He's always been able to offer a lot of advice starting off when I was young, and that's kind of like my earliest memories of starting.
That's interesting because a lot of people have parents that are not supportive.
Yeah, for sure.
Did your dad play games growing up?
No, absolutely not. He's like a Vietnam War vet.
Really?
He's just that guy. And I'm not sure what it was. And I remember him saying, the reason why he was supportive is just because the people at the arcade, they were good people. And he wanted me to like be around them and everything like that. And it's good to have older role models in your life, with all my friends growing up as a kid were like older than me. So I got to see a lot of, positive examples, bad examples, what kind of footsteps to follow in. So I think I got a lot of compliments going like, oh, you're so mature for your age. You're just so chill or whatever. But that's probably because I was just hanging out at the arcade every single day. Instead of going to like soccer practice or going to whatever, I was just at the arcade chilling with all these guys, and I was just that quiet kid. And that's kind of actually how I got the name Anakin. They gave me the name Anakin because of Star Wars: The Phantom Menace.
Yeah. That was going to be one of my questions.
I was that little kid, and they were like, "Yo, that's the chosen one. He's gonna grow up one day to like carry the banner. He's gonna represent, bring balance and everything." You were
the pod racing champion.
It's funny. It's funny how how it goes. I'm still here, still Anakin.
Yeah. When you started competing, you started at a really young age, and there's always talk about how the mind develops when you start something very early. Mm-hmm. Do you think that's part of the reason why you're successful? And could you have been successful if you had started Tekken, let's say, 10 years later, like at 21 or 25, when you're an adult, and had the same amount of success?
To be honest, I don't think so. Just because Historically, Tekken is one of those games that takes a very, very long time to get good at, you know, and that's because it's so deep, it's so advanced. There are a lot of things you have to think about. And as a kid, I wasn't thinking about any of that stuff. I was just there playing, pressing buttons, doing my attacks because I liked them, doing this because I liked it, without really much of a thought process. And that was kind of like my philosophy in Tekken. A lot, even sometimes to this day. A lot of my play is just based on instinctual reads and everything, instead of just like being that technical lab monster who knows everything about the game. You know, I get in there and I'm in your head. You know, I'm in your head. I'm trying to mix you up, and that's kind of like my style. That's how I play. But I think, like you said, you know, when you're young, you can learn a lot faster. And I think we've seen it time and time again. Even now, when you see a new prodigy, you see like their play style. It's so carefree. It's so like dangerous. And that's because like you're young and you don't really have that much to think about, right? And you're playing against an adult who's just like, their mind is just filled with all these thoughts. And you can see it in the game, how much faster you can be when you're not thinking as hard.
Yeah, I guess you don't have other stuff to worry about too. Because I've always thought adults can pick up on stuff, but yeah, when you get older, you just have so many more things going on in life.
Right.
When you're a kid, you're not worried about girls. You're not worried necessarily about grades that much, or
it's a little
money.
Easier nowadays too, just because like since Tekken has really emerged recently as like the premier fighting game, you have a lot more content creators. You have a lot more resources that you can utilize to improve your game if you are really that dedicated. So I think that nowadays, you know, you see players come in and 2-3 years later, they're already like a threat. They're already dangerous. And that's because of the growth that the scene has experienced over the years. But back in the days, I remember just taking 30 minutes on my 56K to download one match. You know, one video, a 1 minute combo video, spending all just to watch. So it was a slow grind back in the day. That's why I was just at the arcade every single day, taking my beatings and learning how to get better. Pretty much, I wrote stuff down on little pieces of paper, things I wanted to try out, and that's kind of how I got my foot into like, you know, strategizing a little bit more and kind of working on my game piece by piece. Just cause like, you know, I felt the potential. You know, just I might win a game here and there, you know, especially getting second in my first tournament. I felt like this is something that I want to do good at, and not knowing what would come of it, of course, because I'm just a kid playing a game. But it was still something that I was very, very passionate about, because, you know, once you find that thing that you love, you're going to stick to it for as long as you can.
Were you ever intimidated when you were young going into those environments? Because I mean, especially in arcades, that's, I think, among the most intimidating environments to compete in a game. I mean, most competitive players are playing online, you know, at home,
in the comfort of your own bedroom.
Yeah, you're in your chair that you sit in all the time. It's, you know, you might have your cat or your dog around. Where to go to a live, not just a live event, but to be adjacent to somebody that you're competing against, that you're trying to destroy. What was that like for you as a kid?
Man, I actually am fortunate because being in Atlanta, you know, your average typical gamer is not that, you know, eccentric. They're more like introverted and they're quiet. They're shy. They don't really talk a lot of trash unless it's over the mic online or whatever, right? So, you know, your typical gaming person is not going to be that hostile. But Atlanta was the exact opposite of that. Those guys that went in there, I don't know if you could curse. I'm just gonna say they trash talked all the time. It would just be nonstop. It was like a madhouse in there every single day. And there I was, just like a little 10-year-old kid, just standing there like loving it. Because one of the best things was when I beat an older guy, like everybody would give him hell for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
and it was just like, I like it. And then it got to the point where those guys would just get so frustrated with losing to me that they would try to like intimidate me when they step up. They, you know, like puff their chests out and start talking trash while they're playing. And it was just, like I said, as a kid, I didn't really think much of it. You know, I'm not going to get beat up. They're not going to beat me up or anything. So it was more fun to experience that, you know, being bred through like the fire and all the, just raised by wolves out there, those savages in Atlanta. And like in the FGC, especially for Tekken, that's our reputation. We talk trash and we love it. You know what I mean? We like to represent. We had a chip on our shoulder as a community when we emerged onto the Tekken scene. It was like West Coast dominated, and we came onto like the forums saying, "Hey, we play Tekken," and those guys were just like, they brushed us off. So that's what I said. Like, when we traveled back in the day, or when they traveled, because I didn't travel, it was to prove a point, and Atlanta had that point to prove. That's why we're currently like one of the biggest, most popular places to play Tekken in the States. And not only that, but we have a lot of character. You know, our city, to say the least. I think that has a lot has helped a lot with nerves and just being around tournament environments in general. Like I've never been nervous. I've never felt intimidated by anybody. And I think that it's kind of the opposite from my opponent, just because of how stoic I can be sometimes. They don't really know what's going on in my head. And that's like, in a way,
so
become part of my
you
strategy.
never get nervous.
Yeah.
Even on
Almost never.
stage?
Yeah, pretty much never. And that's just because of, there's no point in being nervous. I'm usually just in that flow state. I'm so focused on my match that if for 1 second I say, oh, what if I lose? Then your concentration is like broken. You kind of waste it. And you're going to look back in retrospect, like if you lost that match, you're going to just be beating yourself up. You know what I mean? Like, oh man, I wish I wasn't nervous. I wish I played better. So my goal is just to go in there and be as relaxed as possible and play my best. So if I play my best, the result is going to happen, and I'm not going to hang my head low. I'm going to, have my head held up high, in loss and in victory. So that's kind of like the way I rolled, and it's worked out for me so far.
How do you get ready for a match? Like here at EVO, do you have any kind of ritual you go through or any? I think the preparation, like gameplay wise, going into the tournament is the most important thing. There isn't really like a lucky sock that I wear or anything like that. It's more or less just scouting, because for the big open tournaments, we have 1,000 players at EVO Japan this year, and the brackets are released beforehand, a week or two in preparation. And that's where the time the pros are taking to kind of prepare for the tournament. They look ahead at potential routes that they take. They're looking at the bracket, not only like where they're playing, but who their potential other opponents could be. So like when I'm preparing for tournaments, I have a potential this opponent. He uses this character. So let me just look up online, see what they play like. Let me just maybe practice their character for a little bit so I can get into the mind of a Jin Kazama user or a Leroy user. And that's kind of what I do. I play pretty much every single character in the game. I'm very well balanced in that sense, and I'm able to follow along with my opponent a lot of times. And that's kind of like the preparation that I take. I'm just make sure you know who you're going to play against, because you don't want to just sit down and not know who you're fighting against, right? Yeah.
And that's probably the most important thing. And then just the usual stuff: eat right, sleep right. Make sure you take care of yourself, because those long days are no joke. You might start at 8 a.m. in the morning. Sometimes you might start at 10, and you might not be there until. You might not be able to leave until 12 hours later. You got to fit meals in there. You got to fit, maybe a rest. And just being in those venues, those large venues that it's nonstop loud. All the people, all the talking you got to do. You're meeting fans, you're meeting friends, and it could take a lot out of you. Especially if you have matches coming up in an hour or two. And that's kind of like that's what separates like an elite tournament experienced player from somebody who's really good and just like at their first tournament, they're probably spending too much energy just having a blast, not really knowing how much that could affect their gameplay later on.
What are your plans for this tournament? Are you just going to try to win the whole thing, or or top 4 would you be enough, or top 8?
This is my first time going to EVO Japan. It's a different beast altogether, just because we're in Tokyo, not America. So the average skill level, the guys that you don't even have a clue who you're, the non-famous guys, they're actually a threat as well. And so I really went into this tournament having no expectations. It's kind of like the off season right now. The Tekken World Tour isn't scheduled to begin until April. And I think this is a really, really, really good tune-up opportunity to kind of like see where I'm at, especially since the game went through recent changes, new characters, a little bit of balancing and everything. And there's more to come, of course, balancing. That's something that you got to do. Just make sure you're active overall. And I wanted to not be so like dormant, just be at home. I could have been easily at home watching the tournament. That's what I like to do. I like to watch tournaments when I'm not attending. It's a different experience watching it at home, but I decided to take, that opportunity to come out here and see where I stack up. And I had a really good year last year. I placed really well at a lot of major tournaments. And so, of course, I think I do have personal expectations. But like I said, I just want to play my best. I want to play good and make sure that I don't have any regrets, win or lose. So, of course, every time I sit down, I think that I can win. And I know that I can win. And so, like, I'm going for first place, of course. But then if I don't win, it's okay. There'll be another tournament. There'll be more chances. And as long as I improve after losing, then that's what matters the most.
How much are you traveling these days? Because whenever a game really starts to pick up, and Tekken 7, I think, is absolutely in that phase. I mean, Tekken's always been a big game, but now the momentum that it has behind it is huge. And obviously, so much of being a pro is practice and knowledge as well. You have to know a lot about the game, but you have to be constantly training. And it seems like there's so many Tekken tournaments going on all the time. Does that interfere with your ability to maintain your skill?
No, not really. Thankfully, these days I'm more active than ever as far as attending tournaments, traveling, and everything. Since I've been sponsored by Red Bull, there's a lot more just traveling to not only play in tournaments, but just to attend as a spectator. I might be there. I might go somewhere to just like hang out with the local scene. So I've been doing a lot of just travel side projects and everything. And it gives me a sense of purpose, when I'm out and about, instead of just being at home all day. I could always play Tekken no matter where I go. I've got a mobile setup, and I enjoy going to different cities in America and playing with other local communities. And one cool thing about America, although the player skill is not all there sometimes, we do have the best tournaments. That's why everybody comes to EVO in America. Everybody comes to the premier tournaments in the United States. That's one of our advantages. So I enjoy going to tournaments I'm competitive. So I've always just been up for going to tournaments. A lot of people don't like tournaments. Like good players, they prefer to just play longer sets and kind of in order to kind of see who the better player really is, because, with tournaments, the limited time and everything, forces everybody to play short sets. And so a lot of times we aren't seeing the full story when it comes to a matchup between two players. That's why some people prefer tournaments. Some people prefer long sets. I love tournaments just because it's like the king of the hill type environment, last man standing. That's just like my competitive drive. Just
it's such a feat too.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like how many dead bodies are
there's
below you.
There's no other feeling. Than just winning a tournament or just doing battle on stage. And if you're representing, that's even better. That's why I always throw up the A when I'm playing, just to let everybody know where I'm from, Atlanta, Georgia. And that's kind of my thing. I love tournaments. I'm never going to get tired of them. So more travel, the better.
What do you think of, well, let me rephrase the question. So in StarCraft, sometimes we'll say, if these guys play 100 games, this guy wins. But in a best of 3 or a best of 5, there's enough tricks and techniques where you can throw somebody off, but once they figure out maybe some of your bullshit strategies, or you play a certain way and it's a little bit gimmicky, and if I figure that out, I can map around that. I imagine it's the same thing with fighting games.
It's the exact same thing. So StarCraft, you might get 6 pulled or whatever, right?
Exactly.
And that's one game already down. And a lot of times in Tekken, you get off to a bad start. And that's when the pressure starts to sink in. That's when the butterflies start appearing. All that, the tension in your body, you feel it, when you suffer a bad game. But it's all about composure. And I spoke a lot about just being not nervous and always keeping a level head. That's why you got to be ready for everything. And even in this tournament, especially, it's so dangerous for the reason I just mentioned. Some random guy could just sit down and be like this killer. He could just have that style for you. He could just have that game plan.
He just shows up with something and you haven't seen it before.
He'll beat you and then lose the very next match. And that's kind of like those landmines that you're trying to avoid. That's kind of like, it excites me. You know what I mean? The danger that's out there. And so, yeah, it happens. It happens almost every single tournament. There are a lot of top players, and not everybody's going to make it.
I know that, and this isn't just the case with fighting games, but competitive games in general. There's always this talk about what role the publisher plays. You look at, let's take League of Legends. Riot is very hands-on. I mean, the most hands-on out of any company. With Valve and Counter-Strike, hands-off. They let ESL run their tournaments. They'll let the market basically decide. Blizzard somewhere in the middle. Most companies that publish fighting games seem to oftentimes have the hands-off approach.
Yeah.
But it seems like with Bandai Namco, they're getting more hands-on. What is your take with the Tekken publishers and how they handle the tournaments and competitive play?
I think for a majority of the time, prior to Tekken 7, it was hands-off, like you said. They'd make the game and just leave it there. And I don't think there really was a landscape for there to be, esports and everything like that for Tekken. It was just kind of like that niche game. And so that was why in the past, there weren't frequent updates to the game, just because I think there weren't any reasons to kind of be so hands-on and everything. But as the years went on and as gaming became more of a thing, and especially if you look outside of fighting games to some of the other genres, there's potential, right? And even as traditional of a company, as maybe Bandai Namco is, being from Japan, those guys are super traditional. They saw the light, I think, especially when Tekken 7 grew and grew and grew, and even now is still growing. 4 years in, usually 4 years in a fighting game, the next one's already announced and you're looking forward to it, and it's that lame duck period where nobody's really playing. People are like branching out, trying other fighting games while they wait for their new favorite one to come out and everything. But Tekken's still going strong, and Bandai Namco has done a really, really good job of capitalizing on the momentum. The developer, Harada-san, and now Michael Murray, they've been with the game for a long, long time. So just them being in charge and just, trying to get those changes approved, trying to get everything done the right way. I think this time around, everything's been perfect. You know what I mean? I'm not really a complaining type. I'm not gonna talk down on the developers when my character's not good or when there's whatever. But just like being like that fly on the wall for the past 2 decades, watching Tekken grow, it's truly been amazing to see them just regularly update the game and listen to the fans, take their input and everything. And it really shows, we've got a great scene now. So I think that there's no like turning back at this point. It's more of a hands-on thing now. Ever since we started with the Tekken World Tour, Tekken wasn't the first fighting game to start a season-long world global tour like that. It was really, I think, Street Fighter that started, and I think the success of the Capcom Pro Tour really opened up a lot of the developers' eyes. And now you got NetherRealm supporting big prize pool, that WB money. Bandai Namco's coming in with the TWT. Almost every single fighting game has got the global tour. It's worth a shot for sure, and it brings a lot of like attention to your game. I think we're on the right path.
Yeah, my background for fighting games, I played Soul Calibur and MVC2, because that was what was at my arcade.
Yeah.
And then I got into Street Fighter 4 when that came out. I really was excited before Street Fighter 5 came out, but that's kind of a controversial game, at least in some circles.
Especially when it came out, I remember.
Yeah. Well, yeah, when it came out, it was like the online play wasn't even, it was a joke, basically. But, the game operates quite differently from 4. And there are people that prefer 4.
Still to this day.
Still to this day. Is part of, I guess, for the sake of this conversation, are some of the mistakes that Capcom's made part of the reason why Tekken 7's so successful? Because right now, Tekken 7 is the biggest fighting game.
I don't think it's more about just capitalizing on Capcom's mistakes. I just think that the way that things have been just create that perfect storm for Tekken to succeed at this point. Let's take, for example, Street Fighter. From game to game to game, a lot of times, like, Street Fighter is completely different when you go to the next, to the sequel. Street Fighter 4 is totally different from Street Fighter 5, which is why all that, you had all the controversy with when Street Fighter 4 was released. It was so popular. It lasted a very, very long time. CPT was born, and it was perfect, right? Why did they change it? Why did they make almost a completely new game, new engine, new mechanics without even like knowing it was going to work? Like, if it ain't broke, you don't want to fix it.
Yeah, out of curiosity, just on that note, like, is this a problem that happens in games in general sometimes, where it seems like publishers are constantly having to innovate when maybe they don't need to? Yeah.
Yeah. I can't speak to other games for the most part, but you look at StarCraft and its long history, it's still in essence in many ways the same game.
Yeah.
And maybe they catered to more casual fans by making you able to select more units at once or whatever, but it's still those 3 races. It's still the exact same game for the most part, and it's you versus that guy. I think with Tekken, it's more like StarCraft, where Tekken, if you play Tekken 3, it's going to carry over to Tekken 4 and so on and so forth. It's like a never-ending story of just this game. And when Tekken was not that popular, it didn't matter because the game was so good. I knew in my mind that, man, I wish we had more people, because I feel like as long as people started playing Tekken, they'd see why it was so good. As long as they could get past that barrier of, man, this is the hardest fighting game ever, I'm just going to go play Street Fighter. Or I'm going to go play more. This game is so hard, I quit. Once people got past that kind of that wall and they're in, I felt like everybody would fall in love with the game. And so when Tekken 7 came out, a lot of the hardcore fans, longtime fans, like the loyalists, were kind of disappointed and upset that some of the changes made were catered to casual fans. A lot of things are easier to do now in Tekken. And I remember that was kind of like the most controversy that we've ever experienced. Like just the changes, the legacy things that they kind of went back on, and just to try to make it easier. And then they added a lot of bells and whistles, like with the rage attacks and everything like that, taking up after Street Fighter, maybe, you know. There's more of like slow motion. Man, slow motion is good, right?
Yeah, that's
so there's slow motion. There's a lot of like little spectator features added that kind of brought in a lot of new people. And now, you know, like I said, I felt like as long as people started playing, I think they're going to fall in love with the game. And that's kind of how it started. They never really went away from, you know, what the game was at its core. You know, Tekken 7 is still Tekken, and I think that it's always going to be the case. And it's hard to say for other games because they're always experimenting. They're always trying to push the envelope, and sometimes it's not necessary. I think we just lucked out.
Would Tekken 8 be a good thing now, or should they try to coast on Tekken 7? I mean, we know eventually there's going to be another Tekken. Yeah. I mean, this is what game companies do, right? I mean, there is a profit model that they want to do, but I mean, when you look at Tekken 7, it seems so complete, at least to me. And I'm not a Tekken expert, but a lot of love was put into that game. Will there be a Tekken 8 sometime soon, and do they need it?
I mean, at this point, we're kind of in uncharted waters. Not only like has the game never been this popular, but like before Tekken 7, there was never really routine updates to the game. And now that Bandai Namco has gone this route and shown that it's a successful plan, you know, to kind of like continue to release new characters even 3 or 4 years into the game and kind of just keep maintenance on it, it feels like a new game almost every single year. This is the 3rd season of Tekken, and kind of like it feels very, very, very fresh just because of the changes made. So at this point, I'm not really sure what the best plan would be. I wouldn't be surprised if they had Tekken 8 like 2 years ago. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was like, man, why even just have it? Tekken 7 is crazy. If I was Bandai Namco, you know, I think it's hard to say because I've never been the type to just put myself in those shoes. You know, I play the game, they make it, it's the best thing ever, and I leave it at that. But when Tekken 8 comes out, I think they're gonna still continue to do well. I think they saw what worked, what didn't work, and that's one thing with Tekken is that like the improvements have always been good. There's never been like Tekken that came afterwards where it was like, man, this is not as good as the last Tekken. It's always been a continuation of the previous the version. I'm not really sure how you can even improve upon what Tekken 7 has done. Yeah. But with the balance team and everything, those guys are geniuses. You know, to make such a well-made game like that, super complex, but at the same time so balanced. I don't really need to make any suggestions or kind of fantasize. I think they're gonna do it right, and I'm always super confident in like that side of things, like the development team and everything. Just because every single Tekken I've loved more than the last.
Yeah, I don't know how true this is, but it seems like you can almost play any character in Tekken, like and not you specifically, but in general, it seems like the game really is. Sure. Incredibly balanced. Why do you think that is? Because a lot of games suffer from heavy imbalances, and they're still competitive. I mean, they're still very fun and playable, but there's characters you would never touch, and or character combinations you never use. Why do you think Tekken has this formula that seems so perfect?
Yeah, it's ironic. I feel like one of its obstacles from the past, you know, holding it back from being popular, is kind of like the reason why, you know, it is so balanced. When you talk about Tekken and kind of the things keeping everybody from getting, you know, their foot in through that door, it's a 3D game compared to most 2D games. So a lot of times the movement is just that in itself, it's so complex, just moving around on the stage. That's super hard to do, and every character has that long extensive move list, sometimes over 100 attacks. How to perform those attacks are very, very difficult sometimes. So with that said, you can really do a lot with one character. You can really make them feel unique, and you know, there are so many different types of tools that you have, and that creates for like an easier balancing opportunity, as opposed to Street Fighter where like 8 characters have fireballs, 8 characters have dragon punches. Outside of those, like 6 or 7 special attacks, you have your basic punch, kick kind of things. And it's very, you know, I don't like bringing down other fighting games, but when I watch it compared to a game like Tekken, it's very, very just like unexciting.
You feel like it's not as complex.
Yeah, it's not as complex, and It's more about just like who's got the fastest reactions, who's got the best character, who's favored in this matchup. You know, Dhalsim versus Zangief. Dhalsim always wins. You know, it's impossible, but that's never been the case for Tekken. We had a low tier bear user win the world championships 2 years ago, and that wasn't really even the first time that somebody put like underused characters on the map. It's been happening for decades. That's kind of like what.
Is that a difference between 3D games and 2D games with fighting? Is it just something in the DNA of a 2D game that, in your opinion, it has to be more simple? Or
not necessarily. There have been good 2D games, bad 2D games, good 3D games, bad 3D games. I can't really say for sure, but I guess one thing that stands out with Tekken is that there aren't a lot of like. It's more realistic. It's probably one of the most realistic in terms of martial arts and fighting styles. A lot of the characters being modeled after prominent figures from like movies or just martial arts or fighting, for example. You see videos comparing Jackie Chan, you know, dude from his moves, and Lei Wulong. And so there aren't like swords and fire, but there isn't like all this fancy stuff that comes about. And it kind of just cuts out all that stuff. And you really have just a fighting game, you know. You're not flying around the screen and everything. I don't know.
It was what did you think when they put Akuma into the game? Was that
I was so excited.
Yeah,
so excited. Just seeing that for the first time was kind of crazy. I didn't think that would happen or could even happen. You know, not in a million years.
Yeah,
they're rivals and they're working side by side. Tekken versus Street Fighter Cross Tekken came out a while ago, and that was really, really cool to see. I was excited, regardless of how he turned out. You know, it was kind of like. That was that first of like good things that came with Tekken 7, starting with that Akuma. Once Akuma came out, it was like it brought a lot of Street Fighter people in.
Yeah.
And at the time, Street Fighter 5 was newer, and he wasn't even in Street Fighter 5 at the time. And we had a lot of transplants just coming over from Street Fighter. A lot of refugees, a lot of guys just were trying out Tekken just because they hated their game. And like I said, that's why I think we lucked out. You know, it wasn't like sabotage or anything. It was just like the cars lined up, the stars aligned, and we were able to just kind of mind our own business, keep moving. You know, it didn't matter that our game wasn't popular. Our time came.
Out of curiosity, what other games do you play? Because I've met people who are competitive who have never touched any other games, and then I meet people that are all about all kinds of games.
Yeah. Right now, I'm not really playing too much of anything just because of Tekken 7 being such an amazing game. And I mentioned how like every year, you know, there's that point in the year where they drop that new season. All these characters are coming out like every other month. So it's always still feels like I'm playing a new game. Yeah. That's why like I'm just still hooked to this game. But before, like for example, when maybe I'm waiting on the new Tekken to come out and there aren't really any tournaments, I've dabbled in a lot of competitive esports games. Yeah. Almost everything maybe except for first-person shooters, just because I get like motion sickness just moving around like for Call of Duty. But I remember playing Brood War back in the day. I remember playing Warcraft 3. I've played, like I said, those light gun shooters. I get like addicted very easily to games. Yeah. So that's why I try to stay away, because I know it's going to cut into my Tekken time. Yeah. Maybe like a couple weeks ago, I downloaded Clash Royale. I gave in because all my friends are playing it. And
there's tournaments for that now.
I know. Like
there's Royale
Red Bull
casters.
athletes for Clash Royale. Yeah. And even playing a simple phone game, like I really appreciate how deep it was, right? So I like to play other games because sometimes they could even help me like have a better mind or like find new strategies in Tekken. As silly as that sounds, just taking a break from your game and coming to another game and seeing how you should think, you know, how you should approach playing this other game. Then you come back to Tekken after a long time and it's like you're still playing as a Street Fighter player. You know, I play Street Fighter, of course, and kind of that's what makes you know, that's what kind of could help you go to that next level. You need to think outside of your box, you know, that Tekken box. So if you're like well versed in multiple fighting games, there's a reason for that, because you have a good like fighting game brain that you can apply to other games. And I think that's the case not only within like a fighting game genre, but like outside. You know what I mean? Yeah. Just playing other games that are like heads up kind of games. So anything pretty much like where you're playing another opponent. The only kind of games that I never really played were like the one player games. For example,
single player games.
Yeah, I never played like Final Fantasy or any of those big single player games just because it's lonely playing by yourself. And
so you're all multiplayer then. Mm-hmm. Now, Do you like team games at all though, or do you like multiplayer
I
games?
played League of
one-on-one?
Legends and everything.
Yeah,
I enjoyed
okay.
it. I think I quit League of Legends just because like it was the last straw came when I played like an hour-long game just to like lose one fight and and we were winning the whole game, but you know the way it works, like the later the game goes, pretty much like you lose one fight and it's done.
Then you're out of the
it's
game
just
for
a big
longer and
waste
longer.
of time.
Yeah.
And I was just so upset I stopped, but I played that game for like a good 2-3 years.
Yeah.
I'll try anything that's popular. You know, Overwatch came out, I tried it. It was a little bit better than playing like Call of Duty. Just like I played Diva in Overwatch.
Yeah.
And it resembled a fighting game in a lot of ways. That character, the way that she played, she's a big robot just flying around punching people.
Yeah, Overwatch is almost like it's like a
hybrid.
MOBA almost in some ways.
I enjoyed that game, but yeah, these days just Tekken. It's too good.
Yeah. How was this interview, by the way? We're wrapping it up here.
It was dope, man.
Yeah,
Like
thank you for
I
doing
was
it.
just trying so hard to like not fanboy, just because I played StarCraft. I met you at like twice. Once
Yeah,
in
we
like
met in
MLG or Atlanta.
Busan.
We met in Busan at the tournament.
Where I need to put this in the video. I need to put the casting of that because that was weird.
Oh,
I should clarify too because people are going to see this and be like, "Why the fuck is this guy at EVO?" We got offered to do a StarCraft gig in Busan, and but in the contract we had to cast Counter-Strike and
FIFA and all that stuff.
Yeah, it was Counter-Strike and Tekken 7 and Brood War, which is kind of an unusual mix.
Mm-hmm.
And they said they were only going to get one commentator set for the whole thing. And so this is right when StarCraft.
There's no one else better than you guys, I guess. It might as well, right?
The Tekken 7, I tried to do all this research for the game, and it's like, fuck, man, this is really complicated. And, you know, the tempo for casting a fighting game is so different than, you know, with StarCraft.
I enjoyed it because I always liked an outsider's perspective. Being just immersed in that Tekken world most of my life, it's cool to see, like, what somebody else thinks about the game or how they view the game, and it's really cool to it was cool to listen to you guys commentate and kind of build off what you would learn as it went on.
Yeah, we were trying to have fun because we have a lot of respect for Tekken. I mean, if you're in Korea, you know about Tekken. Everybody plays it. Him and I, both Artosis and I, picked up Street Fighter for a little while. We were hoping that there would be more gigs in Korea to do stuff there. But we've always known Tekken was it's so hard and it's so big in Korea. And there isn't much English commentary for it out there. But we got this offer, so we did it. We had a lot of fun casting it. It was that was a very that's the only time I've really done a tournament that was like that.
Yeah.
But it was really cool, and you know the fans are they're so into it.
Yeah.
You know, it's so fun to see everybody follow it, and I think there's just something about fighting games that are so consumable compared to other.
Yeah, the guy's beating up
esports.
another guy.
Yeah.
That's all you gotta talk about. Dang, just kicked him in the face, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
And
easy.
watching the bar shrink
Super
down
easy.
and seeing people come back, it's really cool. Well, thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to wrap this up. We have like a short after show for Patreon supporters. We just keep talking for a little bit longer, but thank you for doing this,
Appreciate it, man.
All right, and then we just keep talking. Yeah, dude, this is fucking cool. Thank you for doing this.
For sure, man. I never thought I'd be here. You know, I used to fucking steal my friend's GOM TV account and watch GSL Code S and just be like, damn, these guys are fucking funny.
Thanks, man. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. We have plenty more interviews from EVO to come. It was fun. It was really cool going to an event and hanging out down there as a fan. I've always loved fighting games, and I love the culture behind it. So again, thank you, Anakin, for taking the time to sit down and talk to me. Again, guys, if you can support us on Patreon, it really means a lot. Patreon.com/Tasteless Podcast. This podcast was produced by State, artwork by Alaris, music by Mark Lentz. Special thanks to our top supporters at Patreon, Seth N., Rohit Sambadi, and Charlie Sheever.